On today's Tech Help for Churches, are podcasts outdated? Hi, and welcome again to another episode of Tech Help for Churches. I, of course, am your host, Paul Allen Clifford. You can drop me a line, paul@trinitydigitalmedia.com, or leave me a voicemail, 1-877-763-3246. That's 1-877-POD-ECHO to echo back to this podcast. So let's dive right into the topic. Oh, by the way, if you want to watch this live, it is recorded every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, or now 4 p.m. UTC, thanks to the time change here in the U.S. So just dive in, join me in the chat room like Trip Mac is right now. So, into the topic. I got into a discussion with someone online on a Google Plus group, and we were talking about how to do podcasts and things like that. And someone chimed in and said, well, what do you mean podcast? That's really outdated. No one has an iPod. Well, while that may be true that iPod sales are languishing, in fact, Apple used to have a fall event where they would announce new iPods, and now that's the event where they announce new iPads, which have just been updated, and there was not a mention of the iPod whatsoever. While that's all true, sometimes we keep names of things even though they're not 100% accurate. And I think the medium is absolutely a great medium to embrace. What's wonderful about podcasts is the time-shifted format. So when it comes to television shows, if you want to watch a television show at a time other than when it was originally broadcast, you've got a few options, but it's not the default. So let's say I wanted to watch Once Upon a Time, which comes on Sunday nights. So I want to watch this show, but I'm otherwise occupied during that time. Well, if I have a DVR, I can record it. If I somehow still have a VCR, I suppose I could also record it. I can buy it later on when it's released on iTunes, Amazon, wherever they sell it. Or if I want to wait a long time, I can wait until the entire season is released and buy the DVD or buy the streaming files, etc. Contrast that with a podcast where in order to get it, you need to get it right whenever you want to enjoy it. I'm just not saying this right. Okay, contrast that to a podcast. And in a podcast, you download the file so that you can enjoy it anytime, any place. If you're no longer connected, let's say you're going, later on this week, I'm probably going to be going to a retreat with my church. And I don't know about this new retreat center we're going to, but the last one was horribly connected. So there was almost no cell service for most of the cell carriers. There were one or two where it was iffy, but for most cell carriers, really no cell service, and they didn't provide public internet, so I wasn't connected at all. But I could still listen to my podcast because before I went, I can download them. I use an iPhone. Let me reach back here to my chair, and that's my iPhone, which was upside down. There it is. And I have the podcast app on it, which automatically downloads the new episodes as they're produced. So I don't even have to any longer make a conscious effort. It used to be that in the old days you'd subscribe to a podcast on your computer, and then from time to time you would hook your iPod or your MP3 player up to the computer, transfer those files. And I think what we have nowadays is why podcasting is not dead, why it's still relevant, why it's not outdated. We have smartphones. We also have tablets. We have all sorts of devices that are connected 100% of the time. And these devices can get new content pretty much all the time. So if I run out of podcast episodes, I can go get some more. If all the ones that I normally listen to are, I've just gotten ahead of their production schedule and there just aren't any in the queue, I can still go to, in this case, the iTunes store or one of the other lists of podcasts and get a new one. And that is powerful. Additionally, podcasts have this, they're so inexpensive to produce. So I'm making one right now. You're listening to a podcast if you're listening to the audio, or you're watching the video that I put up on YouTube. I don't video podcast, even though some people think that's the same thing. We'll talk about that on the future show. But they're so easy to listen to that I listen to them when I'm running, I listen to them in the car, and they're so easy to produce and so inexpensive to produce that people can make them on all kinds of topics which wouldn't traditionally be supported. So think of it this way. When it comes to little niches of content and stuff that you're interested in, there's no way that on national television or national radio you will hear a show all about frisbee golf, disc golf, whatever you want to call it. No way. But it might not surprise you to know that there's a podcast about that. Let's look at my own network, shall we? So, churchtechcast.com, if you go there, you'll find that I record 5 shows a week, and they're on a variety of topics that are interesting to the church creative, the church techie. Now, it's possible that there would be a network, or maybe on public access or something, there might be a show or two that is geared towards someone who's creative or someone who's techie. But chances of getting that down to an even more specific niche of people who are in the church and interested in these things, pretty slim. So I think that's another one of the clear advantages of podcasting, is that you can make something that is very, very niche and do that for a lot of people for very little money. So I've often kind of joked that there's an economic motivation behind the movements in popular music over the 20th century. Think about it, and I'm not saying this is actually accurate, but let's just imagine for just a moment that it is. In the early 20th century, you had bands, but they weren't bands like rock bands, which had 4 members. They were big bands. In fact, they were called big bands, and swing bands, and other bands that had 20 or 30 members. So you fill out a space filled with these people, and they each pay a certain sum to get in, and then you pay for the space, and then with whatever's left over, you split it amongst all the band members. Okay, think about that. Let's say there are 20 people in the band. Let's say you have $2,000 left over, just to make the math easy. That's $100 per person. Now, let's forward to 3 or 4 piece jazz ensemble or rock group, which let's say has 4 members. Again, let's say instead of $2,000 left over, you have $1,000 left over. It's half the size auditorium or whatever, and you only have $1,000 left over. Split 4 ways is $250. Now we have a lot of single artists. We've got rap artists. We've got hip-hop artists where there's 1 or 2 people really that make the music, and they get the whole shebang. So even if there's only $500 left after they pay all their expenses, that's twice as much as the rock band made, and which is 2.5 times as much as the big band members made. You see how economically it just makes sense to have fewer and fewer people doing these things? Same way with podcasts. When I was in local television, it would take probably half a dozen to a dozen people to make a local television show. Whereas with the podcast, you can have 3, 4, if you go all out, maybe 5 people involved. Twit.tv is a tech podcast network. In fact, Twit stands for This Week in Tech. And their flagship show, This Week in Tech, they have someone that runs the switcher, they have the host, and they have between 1 and 3 other guests. So a total of 5 people, and that's their flagship, best produced show, and it's very entertaining. Usually lasts over an hour, more likely 2, and so you have 5 people that can split the profits. So economically, it makes a lot of sense, whereas in local television, for an averagely produced show, it takes 6 people. More likely you're going to use even more. When it comes to local sports, for example, once or twice we'd load up everyone in the local production department and go cover a game, and there would be 20 people involved. Now that doesn't take into account the equipment, and the equipment might cost $1 million for everything that you take, including the Winnebago to put it all in. So it can be the economics of podcasting, and just the fact that it takes so few people to do it, mean that it's really, it's a very viable format. Now, some people say, well, why not just put stuff on YouTube, or just put it somewhere where you can download it easily? Well, here's the thing. Well, you want to put it somewhere where you can download it easily. You don't want to put it somewhere where you can't download it easily. Because part of the advantage of podcasting is, if I lose my connection, albeit briefly, I don't lose anything. So while I can stream a podcast, and that's what Stitcher does, and there are other services that do similar things, while I can stream a podcast, I don't have to. I can just download it and then watch it later. In fact, if I were to go to my handy dandy iPhone and bring up the podcast app, even if I turn off the wireless radio, give me just a second to get to the podcast app. I'm trying to make a point here. So even if I were to turn off the wireless radio, I would have access to I want to say about 14 last time I looked. Let's see what we've got. It's updating the library. Haven't turned this on yet today. So if I don't have access to the internet, I still have access to multiple shows that I can listen to until I have access to the internet again. And that can be anywhere from, 14. So I've got 14 unplayed episodes. And a 15th just popped in that I could download. So I have all these shows that I can listen to, and so if I'm disconnected for a few minutes, that's fine. I've got all these shows I can listen to. If I'm disconnected for a few days, let's say I'm on a retreat, I still have probably, that shows 90 minutes, 2 hours, 3, 4, 6 minutes, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got about 10 hours of content here. So with smartphones, with tablets, with always-on internet connections that claim to be always on but sometimes are a little iffy, I just think that podcasting is just poised to take off even further. Now, you might have noticed that there's recently been a little bit of press saying, podcasts, they're back. Well, according to Libsyn and Blueberry, the two largest podcast hosts, podcasts never left. It's just some people forgot that they existed, and now they've noticed, and so they're writing articles about how they're back. So I'd say that there's a bright future here. From an economic standpoint, from a special interest standpoint, and from a technological standpoint, that these three things are converging in such a way that people are finding that they have the ability to listen to what they want, when they want it, and I gotta tell you, it feels a little odd to me if I've left my phone somewhere and I turn on the radio and I get out of the car and I can't pause it. Whereas when I get out of the car, I can pause it. Or when I get done with my run, I can pause it and I can pick up a week later, a day later, 5 minutes later. So I just think that podcasting is just such a great medium. And you might know that there's really no surprise that I think that this is such a great medium because I literally wrote the book on podcasting. If you're listening to the audio, I'm holding up a copy of Podcasting Church, my first book, which you can get over on Amazon. By the way, Amazon now has a thing where if you buy the paperback, you get a free copy of the Kindle book. Well, the author gets to decide if there's a discount. I've decided if you buy the paperback, you get a free copy of the Kindle book. And that's across the board for all my titles. So head over to Amazon if that's something that interests you. If you just want the electronic copy, you can subscribe to my newsletter, and I give an electronic copy away free with that. So if you go to bit.ly/podcastchurchfree, you can get on the newsletter, hear weekly updates from me, what I've got brewing in the background, how things are going, and you also get a copy of Podcasting Church, which, even though I wrote it a few years ago, is still pretty well up to date. Podcasting being a pretty open medium is something that here. Yeah, when I wrote this, I wrote it from the standpoint of making it evergreen. There are a few things that perhaps could use some tweaking, but I think in general it turned out really, really well. So, all that to say, you can read more about podcasting in that book. And by the way, this month on this show, I'm talking all about podcasting. So if you have any questions, feel free to send them in, and we'll talk more about this. I think that churches really need to embrace this medium and really need to use it in their efforts to go out and change eternity. Until next time, I'm Paul Allen Clifford with TrinityDigitalMedia.com.